Ratio and proportion. Our objectives are to write and simplify ratios, as well as use proportions to solve problems. Who uses this? Filmmakers use ratios and proportions when creating special effects. Let's look at some vocabulary first. A ratio compares two numbers by division. A proportion is an equation stating that two ratios are equal. In a proportion, you have extremes and means. The extremes are the A and D values. The means are the B and C values. Cross products. The product of the extremes and the product of the means. Let's look at an example using ratios. The ratio of the side lengths of a quadrilateral is 2 to 3 to 5 to 7, and its perimeter is 85 feet. What is the length of the longest side? Well, since we're dealing with a ratio of 2 to 3 to 5 to 7, and perimeter meaning that we need to add up all of our sides, and that has to equal our 85. Now, we don't know what the value that goes with 2, 3, 5, and 7 is to make 85 feet. So we can set up an equation. 2x plus 3x plus 5x plus 7x is going to equal our 85 feet. Now, we can simplify by combining like terms, giving us 17x equals 85. Then divide both sides of our equation by 17, and x equals 5. We're not done yet. It wanted to know what is the length of the longest side. Well, the longest side is going to be the one with the largest number. So we want to go with our 7x. So we're going to substitute our 5 in for x. So we have 7 times 5, which gives us 35. And since we're dealing with feet, it's 35 feet long. The cross product property. In a proportion, if A over B equals C over D, and B and D are not 0, then if you multiply A times D, it's going to equal B times C. Some of you may have heard it before as cross multiplication. Let's try a couple of examples together. Alright, so in A, we want to multiply our 5 times 63. So 5 times 63, and that's going to equal our y times 45. So 45y. 5 times 63 is 315, and that's going to equal our 45y. And then we're going to divide both sides of our equation by 45 because we want to get y by itself. So y, in this case, equals 7. Let's look at this next one. This one is a little bit trickier because you have a binomial and another binomial that you're going to be multiplying together. So we have x plus 2 times x plus 2, and that's going to equal 6 times 24. Now, 6 times 24 is 144, and we can rewrite this because we notice that x plus 2 is the same thing as x plus 2, so we can simply write it as x plus 2 squared. Well, if we want to get rid of the squared, we can take the square root of both sides of the equation. So we're going to take the square root of both sides of the equation. That's going to leave us with x plus 2 equals plus or minus 12, because remember back to algebra, if you take the square root of something, we don't know whether or not it was originally plus or minus after taking it. So then we would subtract 2 from both sides of the equation, and x equals, we're going to have to do 1 with the plus, so if it's positive 12 and we subtract 2, we will have 10, If it was negative 12 and we subtract 2, we will end up with negative 14. The following table shows equivalent forms of the cross product property. You can memorize these, or you can just realize that you can solve for one set of variables or another, or manipulate the equations. The proportion A over B equals C over D is equivalent to the following. You can cross multiply, giving you A times D equals B times C. Or if you have B over A, that's the same as D over C. Or if you have A over C, that's going to match up with B over D. You can think of this in terms of backwards cross multiplication. For example, if you multiply A times D, you're going to get A times D here and C times B. B times C, A times D. Either way you look at it, you're going to have a combination of AD and BC together on each side of the equation whenever you're done cross multiplying with your fractions. So let's look at a couple of examples. Given that 4x equals 10y, find the ratio of x to y in simplest form. Well, we can look at x to y as x over y, and then we can ask ourselves, how would we cross multiply to end up with 4x? So where should the 4 go, on the top or the bottom? Well, if we put it on the top, we'd end up cross multiplying and ending up with 4y. That's not going to work, so the 4 needs to go on the bottom and the 10 needs to go on the top. You have one more step. It said simplest form, so we need to simplify this. We can divide 10 and 4 by 2, giving us 5/2. And if we write it the way the problem did, we would have 5 to 2. Try this next one on your own. Now that you've had a moment to try this next one on your own, let's try it together. So we want to find the ratio of y to x in simplest form if 16x equals 20y. So we have y to x equals. Alright, so we want to be able to end up with 16x when we're done cross multiplying. So that means the 16 has to be on the top, so that way we have 16x, and then the 20 would be on the bottom, so that way we would have y times 20. We need to go one more step because we need to put this in simplest form. Really important to follow directions like this. So we can divide the top by 4 and the denominator by 4. So 16 divided by 4 is 4, and 20 divided by 4 is 5. And then if we write it in the form that they gave us in the problem, we have 4 colon 5. Let's look at a real-world application. During the filming of The Lord of the Rings, the special effects team built a model of Sauron's tower with a height of 8 meters and a width of 6 meters. If the width of the full-size tower is 996 meters, what is the height? We can set up a proportion. So you can think of it as the height of the model over the width of the model equals the height of the actual tower over the width of the actual tower. And then we can just substitute in for what we know. So the height of the model is 8, the width of the model is 6, and that's going to equal what we're trying to find is the height, so that's our unknown, over our 996. Then we can simply cross multiply. So we have 8 times 996 equals 6 times x. 8 times 996 is 7,968, and we have 6x. So then we're going to divide both sides of our equation by 6, and we end up with 1,328. And we're dealing with meters, so the height is 1,328 meters. So that's how tall the actual tower is. Well, that concludes our lesson on ratios and proportions.